The dust clung to her throat like ground glass, and when Sophia Jane finally saw the wooden gate rising from the heat shimmer ahead, her knees gave out beneath her like severed puppet strings. She hit the hard Texas earth face first, tasting copper and dirt, her fingers clawing uselessly at the ground as consciousness flickered like a dying candle flame. The year was 1878, and 3 days earlier she had fled San Antonio with nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate hope that her mother's distant cousin might still be living in Brownsville. That hope had died somewhere around the second day when she realized she had been given the wrong directions entirely, and now she lay sprawled in front of some stranger's ranch, her lips cracked and bleeding, her vision tunneling to black. She heard boots crunching on gravel, felt strong hands turning her over with surprising gentleness. Through the haze of near delirium, she saw a face lean over her, shadowed by the brim of a worn leather hat. The man's jaw was strong and dusted with stubble, his eyes the color of good whiskey in lamplight. "Easy now," he said, his voice rough but kind. "You're home now. Rest." The words made no sense to her fevered mind because this was not her home. She had no home anymore, but the authority in his tone settled something deep in her chest, and she let the darkness take her. Ethan Quinn carried the woman into his house with careful steps, noting how light she was, how her dress hung on her frame like fabric on a scarecrow. Her dark hair was matted with dust and sweat, her face sun-scorched and gaunt. He had seen plenty of desperate folks passing through his land on the outskirts of Brownsville, but something about this woman struck him differently. Maybe it was the determination still visible in the set of her jaw, even unconscious, or the way her fingers had been clutching at the dirt like she refused to give up even when her body had nothing left to give. He laid her on his bed, the only real bed in the small ranch house, and fetched water from the pump. His housekeeper would not arrive until Monday, it being Saturday afternoon, so he was alone in this. Ethan had grown up with 3 sisters before fever took them and his mother when he was 16, so he knew enough about tending to a woman to not feel completely lost. He dampened a cloth and cleaned the dust from her face, careful around the cracked lips and the angry sunburn across her nose and cheeks. Her eyes moved beneath her lids, trapped in some dream or memory. She murmured something he could not quite catch, then fell silent again. Ethan brought a cup of water and managed to get a few drops past her lips, watched her throat work reflexively to swallow. Good. That was good. He pulled a chair beside the bed and sat studying her. She was young, probably early 20s, with fine features that spoke of better days. Her dress had once been quality fabric, he could tell, though now it was torn and stained beyond recognition. No wedding ring on her finger, no jewelry at all. Either she had never had any or she had sold it, or someone had taken it from her. The sun shifted across the floor as hours passed. Ethan got up periodically to tend to his horses and check the perimeter of his property, but he always came back to the chair beside the bed. As evening painted the sky in shades of copper and gold, the woman's eyes finally fluttered open. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then her gaze found him. Panic flashed across her features and she tried to sit up, gasping. "Easy," Ethan said, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "You are safe. You collapsed at my gate. I brought you inside." She looked around wildly, taking in the simple room, the clean sheets beneath her, the water pitcher on the bedside table. Her hand went to her throat, then she seemed to remember something and patted at her dress pocket frantically, looking for this. Ethan reached into his vest and pulled out a small leather pouch. "It fell out when I carried you in. I did not look inside." She snatched it from him with trembling fingers, clutched it to her chest, then seemed to realize how rude that must have appeared. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like sandpaper. "I apologize. It is all I have left. Nothing to apologize for." Ethan poured water into a cup and handed it to her. "Drink slow. You have been walking a while, I would guess." She took the cup with both hands to keep it steady and sipped carefully. After a few moments, she said, 3 days, from a town north of here. 3 days on foot in this heat." Ethan could not keep the disbelief from his voice. "You are lucky to be alive." Luck had nothing to do with it. Stubbornness, maybe. She managed a weak smile that did not reach her eyes. "I am Sophia James, Ethan Quinn. This is my ranch about 5 miles outside Brownsville proper." Relief flooded her features. "Brownsville, so I did make it. I thought I had gotten turned around." "Where were you trying to get to?" Sophia's expression shuddered. "It does not matter now. The person I was looking for is long gone, according to a man I met on the road yesterday. He said the homestead was abandoned 2 years back." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You walked 3 days to find someone who was not there. That is some bad fortune. The story of my recent life, I am afraid." She took another sip of water, and he could see her gathering herself, trying to appear stronger than she was. "I do not mean to impose on your hospitality, Mr. Quinn. If you could point me toward town in the morning, I will be on my way." "To do what exactly? You look like a strong wind could knock you over, and I am guessing whatever is in that pouch is not enough to get you far." Her chin lifted with pride. "I can find work. I am educated. I can read and write and do figures. I can cook and clean, and so someone in Brownsville will have need of help." "Maybe so." Ethan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening landscape. "Or maybe you could stay here for a spell. My housekeeper, Consuela, comes 3 times a week, but this place could use more regular tending. I run cattle, and I am often out from dawn to dusk. Could use someone to manage the house, cook meals, keep things in order." Sophia was quiet for so long that Ethan turned back to look at her. She was staring at him with open suspicion. "Why would you offer that to a complete stranger?" He appreciated her wariness. It spoke to intelligence. "Fair question. Truth is, I have been thinking about hiring someone full-time but have not gotten around to it." "You need work and a place to stay. I need help. Seems practical." He paused, then added, "You would have your own room, the small one off the kitchen. I would pay you fair wages, same as I pay Consuela. And if it does not work out for either of us, you can leave any time you want. No strings." She searched his face, looking for deception or ulterior motive. Ethan kept his expression neutral, letting her decide. Finally, she said, "I will need to think about it, of course. Take the night, get your strength back. We can talk more in the morning." He moved toward the door, then paused. "There is stew from yesterday I can heat up if you are hungry." "I am starving," she admitted, and this time her smile was genuine, transforming her tired features into something almost beautiful. Over bowls of beef stew and fresh bread Ethan had bought from town 2 days prior, they talked carefully around the edges of their lives. Sophia revealed she had been living in San Antonio, that circumstances had forced her to leave quickly, that she had no family left to speak of. Ethan told her about the ranch, how he had built it up over the past 8 years from nearly nothing, how he ran a modest cattle operation that kept him comfortable if not wealthy. What they did not talk about was what circumstances had driven a clearly educated young woman to walk 3 days through dangerous territory alone, or why a man in his prime would be living in isolation without even a regular housekeeper. Those stories would come later, or perhaps never. For now, they were 2 cautious souls circling each other, weighing trust against need. That night, Ethan insisted Sophia keep the bedroom while he made up a bedroll in the main room. She protested, but he would not hear arguments, and she was too exhausted to push hard. As he lay on the floor staring at the dark ceiling, he heard her moving around in the other room, the creak of the bed as she settled in. He wondered what he had gotten himself into, offering work to a woman he knew nothing about. It was not like him to be impulsive. But something about finding her collapsed at his gate had struck him with an almost prophetic feeling, like the hand of fate had dropped her at his doorstep for a reason he did not yet understand. Ethan was not a particularly religious man, but he believed in paying attention when the universe spoke clearly. And a woman walking 3 days through hell to reach his property, at the exact time when he had been thinking he needed help, felt like the universe speaking pretty damn clearly. Morning came with the crow of his rooster and the familiar sounds of his horses greeting the day. Ethan rose, stretched the kinks from his back, and started coffee on the stove. He was frying eggs when Sophia emerged from the bedroom, her hair braided back, her dress brushed clean as she could manage. "Good morning," she said, hesitating in the doorway. "Morning. Coffee, please." They ate breakfast in companionable silence. Then Sophia set down her fork and looked at him directly. "I have thought about your offer. I would like to accept with one condition." "What is that?" "I want it clear that this is purely a business arrangement. I work, you pay me, we maintain appropriate boundaries. I have had enough of men thinking a woman alone owes them anything beyond her labor." Her bluntness surprised him, but he respected it. "Agreed. You have my word as a gentleman, for whatever that is worth from a stranger." "It is worth trying to find out if you are honest." She extended her hand across the table. "We have a deal, Mr. Quinn." He shook her hand, noting the firmness of her grip despite her obvious weakness. "Call me Ethan. Mr. Quinn was my father. Ethan, then, and you may call me Sophia." The first week was an adjustment for both of them. Sophia was still recovering from her ordeal, tiring easily, but she approached every task with determined thoroughness. She reorganized the kitchen, mended clothes Ethan had been meaning to fix for months, cooked meals that were simple but infinitely better than his own rough attempts. She was quiet, keeping to herself, but he would sometimes catch her watching the landscape through the windows with an expression of profound relief, as though she could not quite believe she had found sanctuary. Ethan maintained his routine, up before dawn to tend the cattle, riding fence lines, managing the small operation that was his livelihood. But he found himself coming back to the house for the midday meal when before he would have stayed out, and lingering over coffee in the evenings rather than heading straight to bed. Sophia had a sharp mind and a dry wit that emerged gradually as she grew more comfortable. They talked about books, about the changing times, about everything except their pasts. Consuela arrived on Monday and was delighted to find another woman in residence. The older Mexican woman had been trying to convince Ethan to marry for years, and she clearly saw Sophia as a promising development. Despite their insistence, it was merely employment. She and Sophia took to each other immediately, chatting in a mixture of English and Spanish while they worked. Consuela taught Sophia her recipes for tortillas and tamales, and Sophia shared techniques for preserving fruits and vegetables she had learned from her mother. "You are good for him," Consuela told Sophia one afternoon when Ethan was out. "He has been alone too long. It is not natural for a man." Sophia felt her cheeks heat. "It is not like that between us. I work here, that is all." Consuela made a dismissive sound. "I see how you watch each other when you think the other is not looking. Maybe it is not like that yet, but it will be. You are a romantic, Consuela. I am a realist. And I know what I see." She patted Sophia's hand. "Do not fight it, Mija. Sometimes God puts people in each other's paths for a reason." But Sophia did fight it, the growing warmth she felt when Ethan smiled at her, the way her heart lifted when she heard his boots on the porch in the evening. She had fled San Antonio specifically to escape the expectations and entanglements of men, and she was not about to fall into the same trap in a new place. She had her independence now, tenuous as it was, and she would guard it fiercely. Except Ethan was nothing like the men she had known before. He was quiet where they had been boastful, respectful where they had been presumptuous, honest where they had been calculating. He asked her opinion on matters of the ranch, listened when she spoke, thanked her for her work without condescension. He was simply, frustratingly decent, and it wore down her defenses faster than any amount of charm could have. A month after her arrival, a storm rolled in from the Gulf with shocking intensity. Ethan had been out riding the north pasture when the sky turned greenish-black, and he barely made it back before the deluge hit. He burst through the door dripping wet, leading his horse because there was no time to get the animal to the barn. Sophia jumped up from where she had been anxiously watching from the window. "Get that horse through to the back room, quickly." The small storage room off the kitchen was barely big enough, but they managed to coax the nervous animal inside. Thunder cracked overhead like artillery fire, and the horse danced sideways, wild-eyed. Ethan held the reins firm, speaking in low, soothing tones, while Sophia grabbed a blanket to dry the horse down. They worked together in the cramped space, so close that Sophia could feel the heat radiating from Ethan's body, smell the rain and leather and something else that was distinctly him. Lightning flashed through the high window and the horse reared slightly. Ethan caught the bridle with one hand and Sophia's waist with the other, steadying them both against the wall. For a moment they stood frozen, her back against his chest, his arm around her middle. She could feel his heart pounding, or maybe that was her own. Then the moment passed and they separated, focusing determinedly on the horse. The storm raged for hours. They got the horse settled eventually and moved back to the main room, where rain hammered the roof like bullets. Sophia made coffee and they sat at the table, the lamp flickering with each roll of thunder. "I hate storms," she said suddenly. "Ever since I was a child. My father died in a storm out on the road. Wagon overturned." It was the first truly personal thing she had shared, and Ethan treated it with the gravity it deserved. "I am sorry. How old were you?" 10. My mother never quite recovered. She remarried a few years later to a man who seemed kind enough at first. Sophia stared into her coffee cup. "He was not kind. When she died last year, I thought I would finally be free of him, but he had other ideas about what a stepdaughter might owe him." Understanding dawned in Ethan's expression. "So you left." "I ran. In the middle of the night with only what I could carry. I had heard my mother mention a cousin in Brownsville years ago, thought maybe I could find refuge there. By the time I learned the cousin was gone, I had nothing left to get anywhere else." She looked up at him. "And then I found your gate, and I told you that you were home." "Why did you say that?" I have wondered. "You did not know me." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, turning his own cup in his hands. "My mother used to say that to us when we came in from playing or chores. You are home now, rest." It was her way of telling us we were safe, that we could let down our guard. "When I saw you lying there, looking like you had been through hell, those were the words that came." He paused. "Maybe I was not talking to you. Maybe I was talking to my sisters who never made it home themselves." The fever, cholera, swept through in 1869. Took all three of them and my mother within a week. My father never recovered, drank himself to death within the year. I was 18, inherited the land and built this place from the ground up, determined to make something of it. But I have been alone here since, except for Consuela. I think maybe I had forgotten what it was like to have someone to come home to, until you. The confession hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Sophia reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Thank you for telling me, and thank you for taking me in." His hand turned beneath hers, their fingers intertwining. "Thank you for staying." The storm passed, the sun returned, and life resumed its patterns. But something had shifted between them. A wall had come down. They talked more freely now, shared more. Ethan told her about his dreams of expanding the ranch, of building something lasting. Sophia revealed her love of reading, how she had once hoped to become a teacher before circumstances destroyed that path. He began bringing her books from town when he went for supplies, and she began riding out to meet him in the evenings when he returned from the range. Two figures silhouetted against the sunset. Consuela watched it all with satisfaction and kept her knowing comments to herself, though her eyes sparkled with matchmaking glee. 3 months after Sophia's arrival, Ethan had to make a trip to the North Pastures to move cattle, a journey that would keep him away overnight. Sophia tried to ignore the odd anxiety she felt as she watched him pack provisions, the strange emptiness of the house after he rode out. That night, she lay in bed listening to the silence, so different from the awareness of his presence in the next room that she had grown accustomed to. She realized with some shock that she missed him, genuinely missed him, and that the past months had been the happiest she could remember in years. Here on this isolated ranch, working hard and living simply, she had found something she had never had before: peace, and more than that, partnership. When Ethan returned the next afternoon, dusty and tired, Sophia found herself running to meet him like a sweetheart in a dime novel, and she did not care how it looked. He swung down from his horse with a grin that told her he was just as happy to see her. "Miss me?" he asked, and there was hope in the question beneath the teasing. "The house was too quiet," she admitted. "I did not like it." His expression softened. "I did not like being away." They stood there in the afternoon sun, the truth hovering between them like something alive. Finally, Ethan said, "Sophia, I know we agreed this was just business, but I think we both know it has become something more. At least for me it has." Her heart hammered in her chest. "Ethan, let me finish. I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give. But I need you to know that I care for you, that somewhere along the way you became the most important person in my life. And if there is any chance you might feel the same, I would like to court you proper. Not as employer and employee, but as a man courting a woman he admires more than anyone he has ever known." Sophia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, tears of relief and joy. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "After everything that happened, I swore I would never give a man power over me again. But you are not like them. You have never tried to control me or diminish me. You have only shown me respect and kindness, and yes, I feel the same way. I think I started falling in love with you that first night, when you gave me your bed and slept on the floor, when you treated me like a person who mattered." Ethan closed the distance between them and cupped her face gently in his calloused hands. "You matter more than you know. May I kiss you?" She answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened with months of suppressed longing. His arms came around her, and she melted into his embrace, finally allowing herself to feel safe, to feel wanted, to feel loved. From the kitchen window, Consuela smiled and went back to her work. Their courtship was the talk of Brownsville, not because there was anything scandalous about it, but because Ethan Quinn had been a bachelor hermit for so long that seeing him ride into town with a pretty woman beside him was noteworthy. Sophia met the attention with grace, though she held tightly to Ethan's hand the first few times they walked down the main street together. The shopkeepers were kind, the ladies of the church welcoming if curious. Sophia shared as much of her story as she was comfortable with: the death of her mother, the search for family that led her to Brownsville. She did not mention her stepfather or the reasons she had fled, and Ethan backed her reticence with quiet authority that discouraged prying questions. They attended church together on Sundays, had supper with the few neighbors within reasonable distance, slowly built a life that was both private and part of the community. Ethan continued to work the ranch with Sophia at his side now, teaching her to ride better, to help with the cattle, to understand the rhythms of the land. She proved an apt student with a fearlessness that surprised him. "You really have no fear of these massive beasts, do you?" he asked one day as she helped him separate a calf from the herd. "I walked 3 days through hostile territory with nothing but determination keeping me alive," she said with a laugh. "A cow is not particularly frightening by comparison." Winter came, mild by northern standards but still cold enough to require the fireplace most evenings. They would sit together after supper, Sophia reading aloud while Ethan mended tack or carved small wooden figures he was making for the children of their nearest neighbors. The domesticity of it filled Sophia with contentment she had never imagined possible. On Christmas Eve, Ethan rode into town and returned with a small package wrapped in brown paper. He presented it to Sophia after supper, looking uncharacteristically nervous. She unwrapped it carefully to find a beautiful leather-bound journal and a fine pen. "Ethan, this is too much. I know you used to keep journals before, and I thought maybe you would want to start again, to write down our story or anything else you want to remember." He paused, then pulled a small box from his pocket. "This is the real gift, though." Sophia opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside was a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. She looked up at him with wide eyes. Ethan took the box and knelt on one knee. "Sophia James, you walked into my life when I had given up on ever finding someone to share it with. You have brought light and laughter and love to this place, to me. I know we have only been courting a few months, but I also know I have never been more certain of anything. Will you marry me? Will you make this your home truly and forever?" "Yes," she breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and she pulled him up into a kiss that promised forever. They held each other in the firelight, two souls who had found their way home through dust and determination and the inexplicable grace of fate. They were married in March of 1879 in the small church in Brownsville, with Consuela weeping happily in the front row and half the town in attendance. Sophia wore a dress of cream lace that the local seamstress had worked on for weeks, and Ethan wore his best suit with a bolo tie that had been his father's. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was full of promise and joy. The ranch house became truly theirs, no longer just Ethan's place where Sophia worked, but their home. They knocked down the wall between the bedroom and the storage room to create a larger space, built a proper barn for the horses, planted a garden that Sophia tended with loving care. Life settled into a rhythm that was hard but satisfying, full of work and love, and the small pleasures of building something together. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, Sophia turned to Ethan with a shy smile. "I have something to tell you." He looked at her, noting the glow in her cheeks, the hand she had rested unconsciously on her belly. Understanding dawned and he let out a whoop of joy, lifting her in his arms and spinning her around. "Careful," she laughed. "You will make me dizzy." "When?" "How long have you known?" "I suspected for a few weeks, but I wanted to be certain before I told you. The baby should come in February, maybe early March." Ethan set her down gently, cupping her face in his hands. "You have made me the happiest man in Texas, hell, in the whole country." "We are going to be parents," she said wonderingly. "A year and a half ago I was running for my life, and now I am going to be a mother. And a wonderful mother you will be." He kissed her softly. "Our child is already the luckiest baby in the world to have you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through fall and into winter. Sophia bloomed with it, growing round and radiant. Ethan hovered anxiously, trying not to smother her while also insisting she not overwork herself. Consuela arrived with baby clothes. Her own daughters had outgrown and advice about everything from morning sickness to preparing for labor. They set up a cradle in the corner of the bedroom, made from oak that Ethan had carefully sanded and polished. Sophia sewed tiny gowns and blankets, marveling at how small they were, how soon they would hold their child. The baby came on a cold February night in 1880, arriving with the kind of determination that made Ethan laugh through his anxiety. "That is your mother's stubbornness right there," he said as the midwife handed him his squalling son. Sophia, exhausted but glowing, reached for the baby. "A boy. We have a son." They named him Thomas after Ethan's father, and he had Sophia's dark hair and Ethan's golden brown eyes. In those first weeks of overwhelming exhaustion and fierce love, Sophia would sometimes lie awake watching her son sleep and her husband beside her, and wonder at the strange path that had led her here. 3 days walking through hell to collapse at a stranger's gate, and that stranger had given her everything she had never dared dream of. Thomas was 6 months old when trouble arrived in the form of a rider Sophia recognized with cold dread. She was hanging laundry when she saw the man approaching, and she snatched up Thomas and ran into the house, bolting the door. Ethan was out on the range, too far to hear her if she called. She peered through the window as the man dismounted, her stepfather's business partner, a snake of a man named Carver who had helped make her life hell in San Antonio. He pounded on the door. "I know you are in there, Sophia. Saw you run. We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you," she called back, clutching Thomas tighter. "Leave my property." "Your property? That is rich. You are still legally tied to your stepfather's estate, girl. He died last month, did you know that? Left debts all over San Antonio. Debts that the law says you are responsible for as his heir." Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. "I am not his heir. I have no claim to anything of his." "That is not how the law sees it. You are his stepdaughter, never formally disowned, which means his creditors can come after you." Carver's voice turned sly. "Of course, we could make this go away. I could settle the debts myself in exchange for certain considerations." She knew exactly what considerations he meant, and nausea rolled through her. "Get off my land or I will shoot you." "With what gun?" "I do not hear a weapon being cocked." He tried the door handle, found it locked. "Be reasonable, Sophia." What Carver did not know was that Ethan had taught Sophia to shoot months ago, and there was indeed a rifle hanging over the door. She grabbed it with her free hand, checked that it was loaded, and fired a shot through the window over the door. The glass exploded outward and Carver jumped back with a shout. "The next one will not be a warning," Sophia called out, racking another round with shaking hands. Carver stared at the shattered window, then at the house, recalculating. "You always were more trouble than you were worth, but this is not over. The law is the law, and those debts will follow you." He mounted his horse and rode off. Sophia waited until he was out of sight, then sank to the floor, Thomas crying in her arms from the noise of the gunshot. She held her son and shook, the rifle across her lap, until she heard Ethan's horse approaching at a gallop 20 minutes later. He burst through the door, having seen Carver leaving in a hurry, and spotted the broken window. "Sophia, what happened?" She told him everything through tears, about the debts, about Carver's threats, about her stepfather's death. Ethan listened with a face like stone, then carefully took Thomas from her arms and handed the baby to Consuela, who had arrived with him. "We are going into town," he said quietly, the kind of quiet that spoke of fury carefully controlled. "We are going to see the lawyer and the sheriff, and we are going to end this once and for all." The lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Henderson, listened to Sophia's story and examined the marriage certificate Ethan had brought. "This changes things," he said. "When you married Mr. Quinn, your legal status changed. Any debts incurred before your marriage are not automatically transferable to you, especially as a stepdaughter rather than a biological child. And with your stepfather deceased, his partner has no legal standing to demand anything from you." "But he said the law," he lied, "or he is ignorant. Either way, he is trying to intimidate you into giving him something he has no right to claim." Henderson leaned back in his chair. "I will draft a letter making your legal position clear. If this Carver fellow comes back, he will be trespassing and harassing a married woman, which the sheriff will be very interested in." The sheriff, a grizzled veteran named Morrison, was even more direct. "Any man who threatens a woman and child on their own property is not welcome in my county. You see him again, you send word immediately, and if he shows up at your ranch, you have every right to defend yourself and your family." Ethan put his arm around Sophia as they left the sheriff's office. "You are safe. I will not let anyone hurt you or Thomas. I should have told you before about the stepfather, about all of it. I was afraid. You told me what you were ready to tell me when you were ready. I do not fault you for protecting yourself." He turned her to face him. "But you are not alone anymore. Whatever threats come, we face them together. That is what marriage means." Carver did not return, whether because of the lawyer's letter or the sheriff's warning or simply because he realized Sophia was more trouble than any imagined gain was worth. The weeks passed without incident, and slowly Sophia allowed herself to believe it was truly over, that the shadows of her past had finally released their hold. Thomas grew into a cheerful, curious child who learned to walk early and seemed determined to explore every inch of the ranch. Sophia discovered she was pregnant again when Thomas was 2, and their daughter arrived in the spring of 1882. A tiny thing with Ethan's golden eyes and a set of lungs that could wake the dead. They named her Catherine, after Sophia's mother, and she proved to have her mother's determination and her father's easy temperament. The ranch prospered as the years passed. Ethan expanded the herd, hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the increased work. Sophia kept the books and managed the household, raised the children, and slowly began teaching at the small school that had opened in Brownsville, riding into town 3 days a week to share her love of learning with the local children. Their life was not without hardships. There were years when the rains did not come and they struggled, a fever that swept through when Thomas was 5 that terrified them both until it passed, the constant hard work that was the price of their independence. But they faced it all together, and that made the difference. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan brought Sophia back to the gate where she had collapsed a decade earlier. He had repaired and painted it, turned it into something beautiful. "I want you to know," he said, holding her hand as they looked at the gate together, "that when I told you that you were home, I meant it. Even though I did not know you, even though it made no logical sense, I felt it in my bones. You were meant to be here." Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder. "I felt it too, even through the delirium. Like everything I had been through, all the pain and fear and loss had led me to exactly where I needed to be." She turned to face him. "You saved my life that day, Ethan Quinn. And you saved mine, Sophia Quinn. I was alive but not living, going through the motions. You brought me back to life." They kissed in the shadow of the gate as the Texas sun painted everything gold, Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a love that would last a lifetime. The years continued their march. Thomas grew tall and strong, with his father's way with horses and his mother's love of books. Catherine proved to be fearless and funny, riding almost before she could walk and charming everyone she met. A third child arrived in 1886, another boy they named Henry, who had Sophia's dark eyes and a quiet thoughtfulness that set him apart from his more boisterous siblings. Sophia sometimes stood on the porch in the evenings, watching Ethan work with the children, teaching Thomas to rope, or helping Catherine with her horse, or simply holding Henry while he explained the workings of the ranch. She would remember the desperate, broken woman who had collapsed at this very property, and marvel at how completely her life had transformed. One evening when Henry was 2, Ethan found her there lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" "About second chances," she said. "About how walking 3 days through hell was the best thing that ever happened to me because it brought me here to you." He put his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Do you ever regret it? The hard work, the isolation, the struggles? You could have ended up in a city somewhere, had an easier life." "Easier is not the same as better. This life, our life, is everything I never knew I wanted. I have a partner who treats me as an equal, children I adore, work that matters, and a home that is truly mine." "What could be better than that?" "Nothing I can think of," Ethan agreed. He kissed the top of her head. "Though I still cannot believe my luck that you chose my gate to collapse at." "Not luck, destiny." She smiled up at him. "We were always going to find each other one way or another." As the children grew, the ranch became a gathering place for the community. Sophia's school teaching made her popular with the families in town, and Ethan's fair dealing earned him respect among the ranchers. They hosted dances and celebrations, welcomed travelers who needed a meal or a place to stay, built a life that extended beyond just their family. Thomas, at 16, began courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sensible girl named Emily who could ride and shoot as well as any man, and who took no nonsense from Thomas when he got too full of himself. Catherine, at 14, announced her intention to become a doctor, a proclamation that would have been laughable if anyone had not seen her determination firsthand. Ethan and Sophia supported her dream, knowing their daughter had inherited stubbornness from both sides of the family. Henry, quieter than his siblings, showed a gift for drawing and spent hours sketching the landscape, the animals, his family. Sophia had his drawings framed and hung throughout the house, a gallery of their life captured in simple lines and careful shading. In 1892, Sophia received a letter from San Antonio that made her hands shake. It was from a lawyer, informing her that her stepfather's estate had finally been fully settled, and that there was a small inheritance due to her from her mother's portion that had been held in trust. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference. She showed the letter to Ethan, unsure how to feel. "I never expected this. I thought everything was lost." "Your mother must have made provisions you did not know about," Ethan said. "The question is, what do you want to do with it?" Sophia thought for a long moment. "I want to establish a fund for the school, for children whose families cannot afford books or supplies. No child should be denied education because of money." She paused. "And I want to set aside some for Catherine's medical training when the time comes. The rest we can put back into the ranch." Ethan smiled. "That sounds perfect. Your mother would be proud." The fund was established, and it helped dozens of children over the years. Catherine did go on to medical training, one of only a handful of women in her class, and came home to set up a practice in Brownsville, where she served the community for decades. Thomas took over the ranch when Ethan decided to step back, running it with the same integrity his father had shown. Henry moved to Santa Fe to pursue art, finding success painting the landscapes and people of the Southwest. As Ethan and Sophia grew older, they did so together with the same partnership that had defined their marriage from the start. They took long rides across the ranch, now run by their son but still home. They sat on the porch in the evenings, hands intertwined, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that never got old. On their 30th anniversary, Sophia walked out to the gate where her life had changed. It stood sturdy and strong, repainted regularly by Ethan as his way of honoring where their story began. She heard his footsteps behind her and leaned back into his embrace. 30 years, she said softly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes like forever. The best forever I could imagine, Ethan replied. His hair was silver now, his face lined by sun and time, but his eyes still held the same warmth that had greeted her when she woke in his bed 3 decades ago. If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Not even the hard parts, especially not the hard parts. They made us who we are. He turned her in his arms. You walked 3 days to find a home and you gave me one in return. That is a fair trade in my book. Sophia laughed, the sound carrying across the land they had built a life on. More than fair. It is everything. They stood there together as the sun set, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something lasting and true. The ranch spread out around them, worked by their children now, filled with the next generation of family. In town, the school Sophia had taught at for years bore a plaque with her name, honoring her dedication to education. The church where they had married still stood, as did the small house Ethan had brought her to when she had nothing. As darkness fell and stars emerged in the vast Texas sky, Ethan and Sophia walked back to the house hand in hand, their steps slower now but no less certain. The porch light glowed warm and welcoming, and inside they could hear their grandchildren playing, the sound of family and life and love. Sophia paused at the door and looked back at the gate one last time, barely visible in the gathering darkness. She thought of the desperate woman who had collapsed there, thought of the words a stranger had spoken that changed everything. You are home now. Rest. And she had. For 30 years she had rested in the security of this place, this man, this life they had built together. She had found her home not in a distant cousin's abandoned homestead, but in the arms of a cowboy who had seen a broken woman at his gate and offered her everything without knowing who she was or what she could give in return. Ready to go in? Ethan asked gently. Sophia smiled and squeezed his hand. Always. They crossed the threshold together, closing the door on the night and the past, stepping into the light and warmth of the present. The house filled with laughter as the grandchildren spotted them, running over for hugs and stories. Catherine was there with her husband and their 2 children, visiting from town. Thomas and Emily sat at the table with their 3, the older ones helping set out supper. Even Henry had come home for the anniversary, bringing paintings he wanted to show his parents. Sophia moved through the controlled chaos with practiced ease, settling disputes, admiring drawings, checking the food warming on the stove. Ethan sat in his favorite chair with the youngest grandchild on his lap, telling stories about the old days when the ranch was just starting, when their grandmother had arrived like an angel from the desert. Was Grandma really dying when you found her? The 6-year-old asked, wide-eyed. Nearly so, Ethan confirmed, but she was too stubborn to give up, walked 3 whole days to get here. Why did she come here? I think she was looking for something, Ethan said, meeting Sophia's eyes across the room. And I think she found it. Later, after the family had gone home or to bed, Ethan and Sophia sat together in the quiet house. She pulled out the journal he had given her all those years ago, now filled with entries chronicling their life together. She opened to a blank page near the end and began to write. 30 years ago today, Ethan asked me to marry him. 30 years of hard work and joy, struggle and triumph, sorrow and laughter. We have built a good life here, raised good children who are now raising children of their own. The ranch prospers, the community thrives, and I wake up each morning grateful for the path that led me here. When I collapsed at Ethan's gate, I had given up on ever finding peace or happiness. I was running from one nightmare with no clear destination, just desperate hope that somewhere there might be safety. And then this cowboy, this stranger, told me I was home. He could not have known how much I needed to hear those words, how completely they would prove to be true. This ranch is my home. This man is my home. This life we built together is home. And I have finally, truly rested in that knowledge, let down the armor I carried for so long and allowed myself to be loved and to love in return. If I could speak to that desperate woman walking through the desert, I would tell her to keep going, that every painful step is leading her toward something beautiful. I would tell her that the man waiting at the gate will be the best man she ever knows, that the children she cannot yet imagine will fill her heart to bursting, that the life ahead will be hard but so very worth it. But I cannot speak to her, I can only remember her, honor the strength that got her here. She saved my life by refusing to give up, and in saving my life she saved Ethan's too, gave him back the family he had lost, the love he had stopped believing in. We saved each other. That is the truth of it. Not a rescue but a mutual salvation. Two broken people finding wholeness together. I am home now. I have been home for 30 years, and I will rest here in this place with this man for whatever years remain to us. There is nowhere else I would rather be. She closed the journal and looked up to find Ethan watching her. Writing our story, finishing it, she said, or at least this chapter. There are more chapters to come. I hope so. She set the journal aside and moved to sit beside him, his arm coming around her shoulders automatically. Many more. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds through the open window, the familiar creaks of the house settling, the distant call of an owl. This was their life, simple and profound, built on a foundation of respect and partnership and love that had only deepened with time. Years continued to pass, measured in seasons and harvests, births and celebrations. Ethan's health began to fail in his late 60s. Nothing dramatic but a gradual slowing, a weariness in his bones that rest could not cure. Sophia nursed him with fierce dedication, and when Catherine insisted on examining her father, the diagnosis was what they had feared. His heart was giving out, worn down by decades of hard work and the simple passage of time. How long? Sophia asked her daughter privately. Catherine's eyes were full of tears. Months, maybe a year if he takes it easy. I am so sorry, Mama. Sophia nodded, accepting the inevitable with the same practicality she had faced every other challenge in her life. She would not waste their remaining time in grief and fear. Instead, she made sure every day counted, that Ethan knew how loved he was, how much their life together had meant. Ethan faced his decline with quiet dignity, still managing to sit on the porch each evening, still telling stories to his grandchildren, still holding Sophia's hand like it was the most precious thing in the world. On a warm evening in October of 1901, he asked Thomas to help him out to the gate, the same gate where everything had started. Sophia walked beside him, her arm through his, supporting his weight. They stood at the gate, just the two of them, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. "Do you remember what I said to you here?" Ethan asked, his voice weak but steady. "You said I was home, that I should rest. I need you to say those words to me now." He turned to face her, cupping her weathered face in his trembling hands. "I need to know you will be all right when I am gone." Tears streamed down Sophia's face, but she kept her voice strong. "You are home now, my love. You can rest. I will be all right because of everything you gave me, everything we built together. You can rest knowing you were the best husband, the best father, the best man I have ever known." "And you," Ethan whispered, "were the miracle I never expected, the answer to a prayer I did not know how to pray. I love you, Sophia Quinn. I have loved you from the moment I saw you lying in the dust, and I will love you beyond whatever comes next. I love you too, always." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, a goodbye and a promise. 2 weeks later, he died quietly in his sleep with Sophia beside him, her hand in his, her last words to him a whispered, "You are home now. Rest." The grief was profound, but Sophia did not break. She had been broken once, long ago, and Ethan had helped her become whole. That wholeness sustained her now. She mourned deeply, but she also celebrated the life they had shared, the family they had created, the love that had transformed them both. She continued to live on the ranch, helping Thomas when she could, teaching when her health allowed, writing in her journal the memories she wanted to preserve. The grandchildren visited often, and eventually there were great-grandchildren, a new generation who heard the story of how their great-grandmother had walked 3 days through the desert and collapsed at their great-grandfather's gate. On her 75th birthday in 1905, surrounded by family, Sophia told the story herself one more time. She spoke of desperation and hope, of finding kindness in an unexpected place, of building a life from dust and determination and love. The children listened raptly, the adults with tears in their eyes, everyone understanding they were hearing something precious. "The lesson," Sophia said, looking around at all the faces she loved, "is that we never know when our lives are about to change. We can be at our lowest point, ready to give up, and then something happens. Someone shows us kindness, someone offers us hope, and if we are brave enough to accept it, everything can transform." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Your great-grandfather told me I was home before he even knew my name. He saw someone who needed help and he helped, expecting nothing in return. That is the kind of people I hope you all will be. The kind who sees someone collapsed at the gate and says, 'You are home now. Rest.'" Sophia lived to the age of 82, long enough to see the new century take hold, to witness automobiles becoming common and airplanes taking flight. She died peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1912, in the same bedroom where Ethan had first brought her when she had nothing. Her children and grandchildren gathered for the funeral, and she was laid to rest beside Ethan in the small cemetery outside Brownsville, their headstones side by side, just as they had been in life. The ranch continued for generations, worked by their descendants, a testament to what two people could build when they found each other at exactly the right moment. The gate where Sophia had collapsed was preserved, eventually placed in a small museum in Brownsville dedicated to the history of the region, with a plaque telling the story of the desperate woman and the cowboy who had saved each other. The journal Sophia had kept was preserved by the family, eventually published as a memoir that touched readers with its honest portrayal of love and redemption in the harsh landscape of the Old West. People read about the 3-day walk, the collapse at the gate, the simple words that changed everything, and they understood that sometimes the greatest love stories begin in the most unlikely ways. In the end, Sophia's legacy was not just the family she and Ethan created, or the ranch they built, or even the children she taught. It was the example she set of resilience and courage, of refusing to give up even when giving up seemed like the only option. She had walked 3 days through hell and found heaven on the other side, and in doing so, she had proved that second chances exist, that redemption is possible, that love can heal even the deepest wounds. The story passed down through generations. The woman who collapsed at the gate, the cowboy who told her she was home, and the beautiful life they built together from that moment of crisis and compassion. It became a family legend, a town story, and eventually a piece of history that spoke to the better angels of human nature. The moments when we choose kindness over indifference, when we offer rest to the weary, when we recognize that home is not always a place, but sometimes a person, and sometimes that person appears exactly when we need them most. And so the story ended not with death but with legacy, not with loss but with love that echoed through generations, a love that began with 3 words spoken to a stranger: "You are home now." Those words proved true in ways Ethan could never have imagined when he spoke them. True for Sophia, who found her home in his ranch and his arms. True for the children and grandchildren who grew up surrounded by that love. True for anyone who heard the story and understood that sometimes home finds us when we have stopped looking, that sometimes the longest journeys end at an unexpected gate, and sometimes the person who saves us is the one we end up saving in return. The ranch still stood decades later, worked by the 4th and 5th generations of the Quinn family, a living memorial to what Ethan and Sophia had created from dust and determination, and a love that proved stronger than hardship, deeper than time, and as enduring as the Texas sky that had witnessed their first meeting and blessed every day of their life together. Their story was complete, a circle closed, from the moment she collapsed to the moment she was laid beside him in eternal rest. And if stories have souls, if love persists beyond the boundaries of mortal life, then somewhere in the wind that still blows across that Texas ranch, Sophia and Ethan are together still, forever young, forever in love, forever home.